Rancher heard shouts of "Take it off." In the woods, what he did shocked the whole town. Ethan had always loved the quiet of his ranch. Every morning, just as the first rays of sunlight touched the fields, he would step out of his small wooden house, breathe in the crisp, clean air, and walk toward his cattle. Life on the ranch was not easy, but it had its rhythm, its sense of peace. The early mornings, the soft sounds of the animals, the smell of fresh earth, it all made him feel grounded. Most days were simple and predictable, and Ethan liked it that way. He believed that hard work, honesty, and a strong heart were all anyone really needed to live a good life. This particular morning started like any other. The rooster had crowed just as the first light peeked over the horizon, and Ethan had already finished feeding the cows and checking the fences. He had his old brown hat pulled low over his forehead, a sturdy pair of boots, and a weathered jacket that had seen more sun and wind than he cared to count. The ranch stretched far and wide, bordered by thick woods that no one often ventured into. Those woods were quiet, a little mysterious, but familiar enough that Ethan felt comfortable knowing they were there. As he walked along the edge of the pasture, he thought about the day ahead. He needed to check the barn, repair a broken fence, and make sure the water troughs were clean. He was thinking about the routine of his day when he suddenly heard it, a voice, loud and urgent, coming from the direction of the woods. At first, he thought he was imagining things. The wind sometimes made strange noises through the trees, and the morning fog could play tricks on your mind. But then he heard it again, clearer this time. "Take it off, take it off." The words made him stop in his tracks. They were desperate panic, not playful. Ethan's heart raced. He knew that voice wasn't a joke or a call for fun. Something was wrong, and instinctively he knew he couldn't ignore it. The ranch had always been a safe place, a quiet spot where neighbors trusted each other, but now the woods that bordered his land seemed like they held secrets he wasn't aware of. Ethan hesitated. He had grown up in this town, seen many things, but he had never encountered a situation like this. Should he call for help? Should he wait for someone else to arrive? His mind raced through possibilities. It could be a fight, a prank, or someone trapped. The urgency in the voice left no room for doubt. Ethan took a deep breath and decided to go. He couldn't just stand there while someone might be in danger. He carefully stepped toward the edge of the woods. The sunlight had begun to pierce through the trees, casting long shadows on the ground, and the sound of birds filled the air. But the shouts kept coming, urgent and anxious. Ethan's boots crunched softly on the fallen leaves as he moved forward, his eyes scanning the forest for any movement. Each step made his heart beat faster. He had no idea what he would find, but he knew that stepping back was not an option. As he entered the woods, the world seemed to change. The air grew cooler, the sunlight softer, filtered through the thick branches overhead. The shouts echoed between the trees, bouncing back at him, making it difficult to pinpoint exactly where they were coming from. Ethan slowed his pace, careful not to make too much noise but determined to get closer. Every instinct in his body told him that someone needed his help. The forest was alive with small sounds, the rustle of leaves, the snap of a twig, the distant call of a hawk. But underneath all these familiar noises, the urgent voice continued. "Take it off." It was repeated, almost pleading this time, and Ethan realized it wasn't just fear or panic in the tone. There was something deeper, a sense of helplessness, of someone caught in a situation they could not control. Ethan's mind began to imagine what could be happening. Was it a child who had wandered too far into the woods? A teenager caught in a prank that had gone too far? Or was it something more serious? The uncertainty made him more alert. He knew the forest well, but there was no guide for a moment like this. All he had was his courage, his sense of duty, and the hope that he could reach whoever was in trouble before it was too late. He followed the sound carefully, stepping over roots and ducking under low branches. The shouts became louder and more distinct, but they also seemed to come from different directions, making it difficult to tell exactly where they were coming from. Ethan paused for a moment, trying to listen, trying to map out the sounds in his mind. Then he noticed a small clearing ahead. The sunlight broke through more strongly here, and he could see movement among the trees. Ethan's pulse quickened. He was close. The shouts were louder now, filled with fear and urgency. He approached slowly, trying to remain calm, trying to show that he meant no harm. His voice, steady and commanding, broke through the panic. "Hey, what's going on over here?" For a moment there was silence, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Then the shouts came again, louder and more desperate. Ethan took another step forward, and his eyes widened at what he saw. In the center of the clearing, surrounded by a group of people, someone was clearly in distress. The person was struggling, trying to protect themselves, and the situation was more serious than he had imagined. Ethan's presence immediately changed the energy in the clearing. The people around the person in distress froze, unsure of what to do. Ethan, calm but firm, continued to speak. "Everyone back up. Let's make sure no one gets hurt." His voice carried authority. Years of working with animals and managing unpredictable situations had trained him to stay composed under pressure. He stepped closer, careful not to frighten anyone further. The shouts continued, but now Ethan's attention was focused on the person who was clearly afraid. He could see their hands shaking, their eyes wide, and he knew that this was no longer a simple prank or misunderstanding. Someone genuinely needed help, and he was the only one nearby who could provide it. Ethan's mind worked quickly. He needed to de-escalate the situation. He addressed the group around the person in distress, instructing them calmly but firmly to step back. Some hesitated, some muttered excuses, but Ethan's steady presence kept them in check. The person in the center slowly began to relax, realizing that someone was on their side, someone who could protect them. At that moment, the forest seemed to close in around him, the only sounds being the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional cry of a bird. But Ethan didn't falter. He focused on the person in distress, moving closer and offering reassurance. "You're safe now," he said softly. "I'm here to help." The person's shoulders slowly relaxed, and their voice, trembling but relieved, whispered a quiet thank you. Ethan felt a sense of relief, but he knew the situation was not over. There were questions to be answered, explanations to be given, and most importantly, he needed to get the person out of the woods safely. As he guided them toward the edge of the forest, the adrenaline in his body began to settle, replaced by a quiet determination. He had responded to a cry for help, faced the unknown, and taken action. The experience would stay with him for a long time, the fear, the tension, and the ultimate relief of knowing he had done the right thing. By the time they emerged from the trees, the sunlight was brighter, and the air felt warmer. The calm of the ranch awaited them, a stark contrast to the chaos of the woods. Ethan knew that the rest of the town would soon hear about what happened, but for now, he focused on the person he had helped. His actions, though small in the grand scheme of things, had made a big difference. And in that quiet moment, standing at the edge of the forest, Ethan realized something important. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. Ethan moved carefully through the forest, his eyes scanning every shadow and every movement. The frantic voice he had heard was closer now, and the urgency in it made his heart race. He could hear the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, and the faint murmur of multiple voices. At first, he thought it might be a fight, but the tone of the cries was different. It was more desperate than angry. Someone needed help, and it was clear they couldn't get it on their own. He slowed his pace as he neared a small clearing. Sunlight filtered through the trees, making patterns on the ground, and for a moment, Ethan paused to take in the scene. In the center of the clearing, a group of teenagers had gathered. At first glance, they looked like they were just playing a prank, holding up a large coat or blanket. Laughter and shouting filled the air. But Ethan noticed the girl, or rather, a young person trapped under the coat. She was trembling, her eyes wide with fear. It was clear this was no longer a harmless joke. Ethan's presence immediately caught the attention of the teens. They froze, unsure of how to react. Some of them looked embarrassed, some guilty, and some even a little defiant. But Ethan's calm and firm voice cut through the tension. "Step back," he said clearly. "Everyone just take a step back right now." His authority was unquestionable. He had worked with animals and people in high-pressure situations before, and he knew how to make himself heard without causing more panic. The girl under the coat whimpered, her voice shaky but audible. "Please, help me," she pleaded. Her words confirmed what Ethan already suspected. She was not playing along, she was genuinely afraid. He could feel the fear radiating off her, a mix of desperation and relief when she noticed that someone had come to help. Ethan carefully approached the group. "I'm here to make sure no one gets hurt," he said gently, looking at both the girl and the teens surrounding her. "You need to give her space. Right now, step back, please." His calm demeanor had a surprising effect. Slowly, the teenagers began to obey, their previous laughter fading into silence. Some shifted nervously, muttering excuses, but they stepped away, leaving the girl exposed and vulnerable, but safe from immediate harm. Ethan knelt down to meet the girl's eyes. She looked small and fragile, but there was a strength in her gaze that suggested she had endured more than anyone her age should. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe now. I'm here and I'm going to help you." The girl's trembling hands reached out, and Ethan offered her his jacket, wrapping it gently around her shoulders. The warmth of it seemed to comfort her, if only slightly. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath. The usual sounds of birds and rustling leaves faded into the background as Ethan focused entirely on the girl and the situation. He noticed that she had been hiding under the coat for a while, trying to protect herself. The teens had not realized the seriousness of their actions, but now, under Ethan's watchful eyes, the reality of what had happened settled over everyone. "Can you tell me your name?" Ethan asked, keeping his tone calm and gentle. The girl's lips quivered, but she whispered, "Leela." Ethan nodded. "All right, Leela, I'm going to get you out of here and we'll make sure you're safe. Can you walk with me?" She nodded hesitantly, and Ethan extended his hand. She took it and he guided her carefully through the trees, away from the clearing and the group of teenagers. As they moved, Ethan kept talking, offering reassurance, keeping her distracted from the fear that still lingered. "You're very brave," he said. "It takes a lot of courage to stay strong when things are scary. You did the right thing by staying calm." Leela's eyes flickered up at him, a mixture of relief and gratitude. She clung to his hand, trusting him completely, even though they had just met. The teens in the clearing watched silently as Ethan led her away. Some felt ashamed, others confused, and a few seemed genuinely remorseful. No one spoke at first. Ethan didn't look back, but the effect of his actions was clear. He had taken control of the situation without yelling or threatening. He had simply acted with calm determination and genuine care, and that alone had shifted the balance. Ethan guided Leela toward a safer part of the forest, where the sunlight was brighter and the sounds of the town could be heard faintly in the distance. He kept his eyes on her, noticing every sign of discomfort or fear, ready to respond. "We're almost out," he said softly. "Just a little further and you'll be safe." Leela nodded, her grip on his hand tightening slightly. As they walked, Ethan's mind raced with questions. Who was Leela? Why had she run into the woods? What had scared her so much that she ended up in this situation? He knew that once they were safe, he would need to help her explain everything. But for now, the priority was getting her out of immediate danger. Finally, they reached the edge of the woods, where the sunlight hit them fully and the air felt warmer. The town was just beyond the trees, quiet but alert. Ethan guided Leela to a safe spot and helped her sit down on a small log. She looked exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Her face was pale and her hands shook slightly. Ethan wrapped his jacket more securely around her shoulders and offered a reassuring smile. "You did great," he said gently. "You stayed calm and now you're safe. That's what matters most." Leela blinked, tears welling in her eyes, but she didn't cry. Instead, she took a deep breath and whispered, "Thank you." Ethan nodded, knowing that words could not fully convey the relief he felt at seeing her safe. He took a moment to look around, making sure the teens had not followed them. They had disappeared back into the trees, likely thinking about what had just happened. Ethan knew that their actions, though careless, were not meant to harm, but they had caused fear. He would have to address that later, but for now, the focus was on helping Leela. Ethan crouched down to her level again. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" he asked gently. Leela hesitated, then nodded slightly. I ran away from home," she said softly. Things were bad there, I just needed to get away. But I didn't know where to go, and then they found me." Her voice trembled, but Ethan stayed calm, letting her speak at her own pace. "You're safe now," he reassured her. "We'll make sure you have help and you won't be alone anymore. No one is going to hurt you here." Leela's eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of fear, they were tears of relief. Ethan knew that this was the beginning of a long process, but for now, she needed safety, warmth, and the knowledge that someone cared. The town was beginning to stir in the distance. Ethan could see the faint outlines of buildings and the morning activity starting. He knew that once they returned, authorities and neighbors would get involved, and Leela would receive the support she needed. But he also knew that this moment, the quiet walk through the forest, the reassurance, the first step towards safety, was just as important. Ethan stood and held out his hand again. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you home, or at least to a safe place. You won't have to face anything alone anymore." Leela took his hand once more, gripping it tightly. Together, they began the short walk back toward the town, leaving the forest and its shadows behind. As they emerged from the trees, the sun warmed their faces, and the sounds of the town grew louder. People going about their day didn't yet know the story unfolding just beyond the forest edge, but Ethan knew that by acting quickly and calmly, he had changed the course of someone's life. He felt a quiet satisfaction, not of pride but of purpose. He had done what was right. Even as they approached safety, Ethan kept talking to Leela, keeping her calm, helping her focus on the positive. "You're safe now," he repeated, "and you're strong, remember that. You can face anything because you survived this." Leela looked up at him and smiled faintly, a small but meaningful expression. It was a smile of trust, and it filled Ethan with hope that she would be okay. By the time they reached the edge of town, the sun was fully risen, casting a golden glow over the rooftops. Ethan guided Leela to a nearby home where she could wait safely, or until help arrived. Authorities would take over soon, but Ethan knew that his quick thinking had prevented something worse. He gave her a reassuring nod and promised, "I'll make sure someone stays with you until you're safe." Leela nodded, finally beginning to relax. Ethan watched her for a moment, then turned back toward the woods. The forest had tested him, shown him fear, uncertainty, and the unknown. But he had faced it head-on, and in doing so had made a difference. That morning, a simple walk on his ranch had turned into an act of courage, one that would not soon be forgotten. Ethan stayed near the edge of the forest for a moment, catching his breath and gathering his thoughts. Leela was safe now, at least for the moment, but he knew there was more to the situation than met the eye. He couldn't ignore the questions that kept spinning in his mind. Why had she run into the woods? What had scared her so much that she had hidden under a coat? And most importantly, who else had been involved in this frightening moment? His concern for Leela pushed him to act further. Ethan knew the forest better than anyone in town. He had grown up playing among the trees, learning every path and every clearing. He decided to take a careful look around the spot where he had found her, to see if there were any clues or signs that could explain the situation. As he stepped back toward the clearing, the sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting long shadows and making the forest feel both beautiful and mysterious. The peaceful morning he had started with was now filled with tension and uncertainty. When he reached the clearing, Ethan noticed something immediately. The coat that had trapped Leela was crumpled on the ground, abandoned by the teenagers. They had scattered when he arrived, probably realizing the seriousness of what was happening. Ethan examined the coat, but it told him very little. He needed to focus on other clues, footprints in the dirt, broken twigs, or any sign of struggle that could explain what had happened. As he moved carefully, he noticed faint tracks leading deeper into the woods. Curiosity mixed with caution as Ethan followed the trail. He had a sense that the truth about Leela's fear was hidden somewhere among the trees. The forest grew thicker, the air cooler, and the sounds of nature more pronounced. Birds chirped cautiously, as if aware of the tension in the air. Ethan's boots pressed softly against the damp earth, and he kept his eyes sharp for anything unusual. His experience as a rancher had taught him to notice small details, and now those skills were more valuable than ever. A few minutes into his search, Ethan noticed movement ahead. At first, he thought it might be a deer or some other animal, but as he approached, he realized it was a person. A young man, probably one of the teenagers from earlier, was crouched near a small thicket, trying to hide something. Ethan's instincts kicked in immediately. He raised his hand to signal the boy to stop. The young man froze, his eyes wide with fear and guilt. Ethan's calm but commanding voice cut through the tension. "It's okay. Come out slowly. I just want to understand what happened." The teenager hesitated but eventually stepped out, hands raised slightly. Ethan could see the worry on his face, the mix of fear and shame. I didn't mean to hurt anyone," the boy stammered. "We were just joking, it got out of hand." Ethan nodded slowly. "I understand. But someone was scared, and that matters more than a joke. You need to explain what happened so we can make it right." The young man nodded, swallowing hard. As Ethan continued to ask questions, he began to piece together the story. Leela had been running from her home, frightened and unsure of where to go. The teenagers, thinking it would be funny, had tried to cover her with the coat, not realizing how terrified she was. Their intention was not cruel, but their actions had amplified her fear. Ethan's careful questioning allowed the boy to explain every detail, and it became clear that Leela's distress was not caused by the teens, but by something far more serious, her life outside the forest. Ethan listened attentively, his expression calm but focused. He knew that Leela needed protection and care beyond what he could provide on his own. He reassured the boy that honesty was important, and that telling the truth was the first step in making things right. The teenager nodded, finally beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. Ethan's presence had transformed fear into accountability, and now the story was coming together piece by piece. The forest, once filled with tension, began to feel quieter as Ethan processed the information. He could see the sunlight breaking through the canopy above, illuminating small patches of the ground. Each detail mattered, from the footprints to the broken branches to the expressions on the teenagers' faces. It was all part of the puzzle, and Ethan was determined to solve it. He thought about Leela, sitting safely at the edge of the woods, wrapped in his jacket. She had been brave, facing fear and uncertainty with remarkable composure for someone so young. Ethan admired her courage. He knew that understanding the full story would help ensure she remained safe and that the town could respond appropriately. He took a deep breath, preparing to take the next step, bringing the pieces together and helping Leela tell her story. As he walked back toward Leela, Ethan reflected on the importance of empathy and patience. He realized that fear could make people act in unexpected ways, and that sometimes even good intentions could lead to harm if not guided carefully. The forest had shown him the fragile nature of trust and the responsibility that came with stepping in to help. He approached Leela slowly, crouching to her level once more. "Leela," he said softly, "I've spoken to them. I understand what happened. You were very brave." Leela looked up, her eyes filled with curiosity and a touch of relief. Did they mean to hurt me?" she asked quietly. Ethan shook his head. "No, they didn't understand what fear felt like, but you were frightened and that's what matters. You are safe now and we are going to make sure nothing like this happens again." Leela nodded, absorbing his words. Her small nod was a sign of trust, and Ethan knew that building this trust was the most important step. He decided to walk her slowly back toward the safer path, keeping the conversation light but supportive. "You know," he said gently, "sometimes people don't understand how their actions affect others, but when we explain calmly, with honesty, they can learn. You taught them something today just by being brave." Leela's lips curved into a faint smile, and she felt a little more at ease. Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders start to relax, and he knew she was beginning to feel safe in his presence. As they walked, Ethan noticed other signs in the forest, small objects Leela had dropped in her panic, a few personal items that might have helped authorities later. He made a mental note to ensure nothing was left behind, thinking ahead to when the town would need to piece together the story. Every small detail mattered, and he wanted to make sure the truth could be understood completely. Eventually, they reached the edge of a small stream that ran near the woods. Ethan paused to let Leela rest for a moment, crouching beside her. "You did really well," he said again. "Bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about moving forward even when you are. You moved forward today, and that's something very important." Leela looked up at him, a flicker of pride in her eyes. For the first time since the morning began, she felt like she had some control over the situation. The calm in the forest contrasted sharply with the panic she had felt moments ago. Ethan realized that the forest had been both a place of fear and a place of protection. Its trees had hidden her, its shadows had concealed her, and now its paths had guided her to safety. Ethan reflected on this quietly, appreciating how even difficult moments could have hidden value. He continued to guide Leela along the safer path, talking gently to keep her mind off the fear and helping her understand that she was no longer alone. "When people care, they act," he said softly, "and someone cared enough to come for you today. That's why you're safe, and that's why you can trust others again." Leela's small nod and quiet breath showed that his words were sinking in. As they neared the edge of the forest, the sunlight grew brighter, and the sounds of the town became clearer. Ethan felt a sense of relief mixed with determination. The discovery he had made in the woods that Leela's fear had a deeper origin made him realize that his role was not just to rescue, but also to support and guide. The truth was more complicated than he had imagined, and handling it carefully was essential. Finally, they emerged from the woods. The air felt warmer, the sunlight stronger, and the distant sounds of people moving about their day reminded them both that life outside the forest continued. Ethan led Leela to a safe spot, ensuring she was comfortable and reassured. "You're safe now," he said softly. "No one will hurt you here. You can take a deep breath and know that the worst is over." Leela closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sunlight touch her face. She felt the warmth of safety, the calm of protection, and the beginning of hope. Ethan knew that while the forest had been a place of fear, it had also become a place of revelation. The truth about her situation had emerged, and now the path to safety was clear. Ethan looked back at the forest one last time, knowing that it had tested him, challenged him, and revealed more than he could have imagined. It had been a place of discovery, of fear, courage, and understanding. And it had shown him the power of calm, patient action in the face of uncertainty. Ethan walked through the small streets of the town, Leela beside him, his hand gently guiding her along the quiet path. The town was waking up to a normal morning, shopkeepers opening their doors, farmers tending to their animals, and children playing near the schoolyard. Nothing seemed unusual to anyone, and yet, in Ethan's mind, everything was different. He carried a story of fear, courage, and relief, and he knew that the town would soon learn about what had happened in the woods. As they approached the center of town, whispers began to spread. People noticed Ethan walking with a young girl, her small frame wrapped in his jacket, her eyes wide but calm. Curiosity sparked immediately. Mothers pulled their children close, shopkeepers paused mid-task, and neighbors stopped on the sidewalks to watch. Ethan's presence commanded respect, but the unusual scene drew attention. Everyone wanted to know what had happened. Some townspeople approached, asking questions. "Ethan, what's going on?" a neighbor called out. Ethan looked at the faces of the people he had grown up with, the people who knew him as a hardworking, dependable rancher. "It's okay," he said calmly. "A young girl was in trouble in the woods and she's safe now. We're making sure she stays that way." His words were measured and clear, but they also carried the weight of experience and responsibility. The crowd slowly grew as more people realized that something significant had happened. Ethan explained briefly, careful not to share details that might confuse or alarm anyone further. "Leela was frightened," he said, pointing to the girl who stood quietly beside him. "She needed help, and we made sure she got it. She is safe now, and that is what matters most." The townspeople exchanged glances, a mix of relief, curiosity, and admiration spreading across their faces. However, not everyone reacted with understanding. A few people whispered among themselves, questioning Ethan's involvement. Some wondered why he had been alone in the woods, why he had taken the initiative without calling for others first. A few skeptics worried about the unknown details, letting their imagination fill in gaps with concern. Ethan noticed the murmurs but did not let them distract him. His focus remained on Leela and making sure she remained calm and reassured. As the authorities arrived, the murmurs quieted. Local police officers and social workers took over the situation, asking Leela gentle questions to understand what had happened at home and in the woods. Ethan stood back, offering support but allowing the professionals to lead. He could see that Leela was beginning to relax, feeling safer in the structured environment of the town. She smiled faintly at him, a quiet acknowledgement of trust and gratitude. Neighbors and friends who knew Ethan began praising him quietly, acknowledging his bravery and quick thinking. "That rancher has always been dependable," one woman said to another. "But today, he did something extraordinary." Others nodded in agreement. It was clear that the town respected courage, honesty, and action, and Ethan's decision to intervene had made a real difference. As the story unfolded among the town's residents, Ethan took time to explain what had happened in the forest, in terms that were calm and clear. He told them how Leela had been frightened, how the teenagers had unintentionally worsened her fear, and how he had guided her to safety. His words were simple, precise, and honest, leaving little room for misunderstanding. People listened closely, their curiosity giving way to understanding. Ethan also addressed the teenagers involved. He spoke to them privately, helping them understand the consequences of their actions without shaming them. "You didn't mean harm," he said softly, "but fear is real and you need to respect it. What we do matters more than what we intend. Learn from this." The teens nodded, visibly remorseful, realizing the seriousness of the morning's events. They began to understand that their playful intentions could have caused real harm if Ethan hadn't acted quickly. Meanwhile, Leela was taken to a safe place where she could rest and recover. She was offered food, water, and comfort, and the professionals assured her that she would be protected from harm. Ethan stayed nearby, quietly watching, making sure she was safe until trusted adults could take over. Her small smiles and tentative conversations with the adults showed progress, and Ethan felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that she would be okay. The town slowly absorbed the morning's events, the shock turning into admiration. People spoke of Ethan's courage, his calm demeanor, and his ability to act under pressure. His actions had not only saved a young girl, but had also taught the community an important lesson about vigilance, care, and responsibility. Parents spoke to their children about bravery and compassion, using Ethan's example as a guide. The story began to inspire people quietly, even before it was officially shared. At the local coffee shop, Ethan sat with a few friends and recounted the story in his calm, measured way. "It was nothing extraordinary," he said, though everyone disagreed. "I did what anyone would do if someone needed help. The important thing is that Leela is safe." His humility only increased the admiration people felt for him. They saw a man who acted out of courage and compassion, not for recognition or praise. The town council decided to formally recognize Ethan's actions. A small gathering was planned, where neighbors, officials, and friends could come together to honor the bravery and selflessness he had shown. Posters and announcements spread the word gently, highlighting the importance of community, care, and timely action. People were eager to attend, not only to celebrate Ethan's courage but also to support Leela, whose story had captured the town's heart. As the day continued, Ethan reflected on the events. He realized that what had started as a quiet morning on his ranch had turned into a life-changing series of events. A simple act of listening, observing, and stepping in had made a huge difference. He thought about how fear could paralyze some, but courage could save lives. The experience reminded him that small actions, guided by empathy and understanding, could ripple through an entire community. Throughout the town, discussions continued. People shared what they had witnessed, how Ethan had acted decisively, and how Leela had been protected. The story was becoming a quiet legend, one that spoke not of heroism in a dramatic sense, but of the bravery in everyday life, the courage to act when it mattered most. Everyone seemed to understand that the woods had been a place of fear for Leela, but also a place where compassion could shine through. By evening, the town had begun to settle into calm again. Shops closed, the streets emptied, and the soft glow of the sunset bathed the town in warm light. Ethan returned to his ranch, feeling tired but satisfied. He had acted decisively, and the town's recognition was not what mattered most. What mattered was that a young girl had been saved, and the lessons of the day would remain with everyone who had witnessed it. Even as he sat on his porch, watching the sunset over the fields, Ethan knew the story was not finished. There would be conversations, follow-ups, and perhaps even challenges ahead. But he also knew that the foundation had been set. Honesty, bravery, and care had guided his actions, and those values would continue to influence not just him, but the entire community. The next morning, news of Ethan's intervention spread further. People spoke not only of the incident in the woods, but of the way he had handled it, with calm, focus, and empathy. The story inspired others to act when needed, to watch for those in trouble, and to understand that courage could come quietly, without fanfare. The town had learned something important about vigilance, community, and the power of one person to make a difference. Ethan, meanwhile, returned to his normal routine on the ranch. He fed the cattle, repaired fences, and worked the land as he always had. Yet, the events of the woods remained in his mind. He reflected on how quickly a normal morning could turn into a situation that demanded bravery, patience, and empathy. And he understood more than ever that courage was not about grand gestures, but about doing the right thing when it mattered most. In the town, people continued to talk quietly about the morning in the woods. Parents praised their children for listening and helping. Neighbors reflected on how they could better support one another, and the teenagers involved began to understand responsibility in a new way. Ethan's calm and decisive actions had created a ripple effect, showing that one person's courage could inspire many. Layla, now safe, began to recover emotionally. She attended school again, spoke to trusted adults, and slowly regained her confidence. Ethan's presence had been a guiding force, and his calm reassurance had helped her feel secure. The town watched her progress, understanding that a moment of fear had been transformed into a story of hope, courage, and the power of human kindness. Ethan's story became part of the town's collective memory. People spoke of it in casual conversations, remembering how a quiet morning had turned into an act of bravery. His actions were celebrated quietly, not for the sake of fame, but because they reminded everyone of what mattered most: compassion, courage, and the willingness to act when someone was in need. The morning in the woods had been terrifying for Leela, but through Ethan's intervention, it became a moment of transformation for the entire town. Everyone learned the importance of paying attention, of acting wisely, and of standing up when it counted. And Ethan, ever humble, returned to his ranch each day with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that he had made a real difference in someone's life. The town had never been so quiet and reflective in the morning hours. Word had spread about Ethan's bravery, and people were slowly gathering near the small community hall to honor him. It wasn't a grand celebration, just a modest gathering of neighbors, friends, and local officials. Still, the atmosphere was electric with gratitude, curiosity, and admiration. Everyone wanted to see the man who had walked into the forest, faced uncertainty, and rescued a frightened young girl, showing courage and calm in a situation that could have ended very differently. Ethan arrived at the community hall in his usual attire, the same brown hat, worn jacket, and boots he always wore on the ranch. He didn't come for recognition, but for him, the real reward was knowing that Leela was safe and cared for. As he walked in, he saw the familiar faces of neighbors, teachers, shopkeepers, and local officials. They greeted him warmly, some with quiet nods of respect, others with more exuberant handshakes and smiles. There was a sense in the air that something extraordinary had happened, and everyone present felt connected to it. Leela was there too, standing quietly beside a few trusted adults who had helped ensure her safety. She had grown more confident in recent days, her fear slowly replaced by trust and relief. Ethan looked at her and smiled gently. "You're doing great," he whispered softly. Leela smiled back, a small but meaningful gesture that showed her courage and gratitude. She had survived something frightening, and now she was part of a story that inspired everyone around her. The ceremony began with a few words from the town council. The mayor spoke carefully, emphasizing the importance of courage, kindness, and community. "Today," the mayor said, "we recognize a man whose actions remind us all that bravery isn't just about grand gestures. Sometimes, it's about stepping up when someone needs help, even if it's scary." Ethan's calm, decisive, and compassionate actions saved a life and inspired our entire town. The crowd nodded, murmuring in agreement, and Ethan felt a quiet sense of pride, though he remained humble. Ethan was invited to speak. He stepped forward slowly, looking at the faces around him. He didn't raise his voice or demand attention. He simply spoke from the heart. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," he said softly. "I did what anyone would do if they saw someone in danger. Leela was frightened and I knew she needed help, that's all." The crowd listened intently, hanging on every word. His humility made his courage feel even greater. Then something unexpected happened. Leela, shy but determined, stepped forward. She looked at Ethan and the crowd, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I want to say thank you," she said softly, her voice trembling but steady. "You saved me. You made me feel safe when I was so scared. I don't know what I would have done without you." Her words were simple, heartfelt, and powerful. A hush fell over the crowd as everyone realized the full impact of Ethan's actions. The townspeople began to applaud quietly, their respect growing louder as the moment continued. Some wiped away tears, moved by the courage, trust, and humanity they had witnessed. Ethan nodded toward Leela, feeling a mix of relief and gratitude. He had acted out of instinct and compassion, And now, seeing the town's appreciation and Leela's gratitude, he understood the far-reaching effect of his simple act of bravery. Local reporters who had arrived quietly to cover the story began taking notes. Ethan's actions would soon be shared beyond the town, a reminder that even ordinary people could do extraordinary things when guided by empathy and courage. He remained calm, answering questions briefly and simply, focusing on the importance of helping others and understanding fear. He emphasized that the real hero in his eyes was Lila. Her bravery in the face of fear had made everything possible. The teenagers involved in the incident were also invited to the gathering. They had spent the past few days reflecting on what had happened, guided by Ethan's gentle mentorship. Standing there now, they looked embarrassed but sincere. One of them stepped forward and spoke quietly. "We didn't understand how scared she was. We were joking, but it went too far. Thank you, Ethan, for helping and showing us what responsibility means." Ethan nodded, his calm demeanor encouraging forgiveness and understanding rather than fear or shame. As the ceremony continued, neighbors and friends shared stories of how the morning in the woods had impacted them. Parents spoke to their children about bravery and compassion. Shopkeepers and farmers discussed the importance of community support. The story had become more than just a rescue. It was a lesson in empathy, courage, and the power of one person to make a difference. Ethan listened quietly, realizing that his simple act had inspired a ripple effect that would be remembered for years to come. After the formal part of the gathering ended, people stayed to greet Ethan and Leela personally. They offered kind words, encouragement, and small gestures of appreciation, flowers, homemade gifts, and warm handshakes. Each interaction reminded Ethan that courage wasn't just about facing fear alone. It was about creating a sense of safety, trust, and connection in the community. Leela smiled through it all, growing stronger and more confident with each passing moment. Later, as the crowd began to disperse, Ethan and Leela walked quietly toward the edge of town. The sun was high in the sky now, casting a golden light over the streets. "You did really well," Ethan said gently. "Today showed everyone that even when things seem scary, we can act with care and courage." Leela nodded, her eyes bright. She had experienced fear, uncertainty, and relief all in one day, and now she had seen how trust and courage could change lives. Ethan reflected on the events of the past days. He realized that the woods, once a place of fear and uncertainty for Leela, had become a place of revelation, learning, and courage. His intervention had shown that one person's calm and decisive action could inspire an entire community. Courage, he thought, was not about seeking recognition, but about taking action when it truly mattered. As evening approached, the town slowly returned to its normal rhythm. People went back to their shops, homes, and daily routines, but the story of Ethan and Leela remained in their hearts. Conversations about bravery, responsibility, and empathy continued in homes and workplaces. Children spoke of the rescue at school, inspired to act kindly and courageously in their own lives. The town had absorbed a powerful lesson that even in quiet places, extraordinary acts of courage could happen. Ethan returned to his ranch, tired but fulfilled. The field stretched out before him, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. The day had been anything but ordinary, yet he felt at peace. He knew that Leela was safe, that the town had learned a valuable lesson, and that his actions had made a difference. He fed the cattle, checked the fences, and walked through the fields, reflecting on how quickly life could change and how important it was to act with integrity and care. Even as he worked, Ethan thought about the ripple effect of one act of bravery. Leela's trust, the teenagers' understanding, the town's admiration, all of it began with a single decision to step forward when someone needed help. He realized that true courage was quiet, humble, and often unnoticed until it made a difference. But when it did, its impact could be profound, touching many lives in ways that were hard to measure. That night, Ethan sat on his porch, watching the stars appear in the dark sky above. The ranch was calm, the animals settled, and the town resting peacefully. He thought about Leela, who would sleep safely tonight for the first time in days. He thought about the teenagers, who had learned the importance of empathy and responsibility. And he thought about the town, which now had a story of courage and compassion to carry forward. Ethan understood that this story would not end here. It would be told in homes, schools, and gatherings for years to come. People would remember the quiet rancher who had faced fear, guided a frightened girl to safety, and inspired a community to act with care and courage. It was not about fame or recognition. It was about humanity, empathy, and the power of doing the right thing when it mattered most. In the days that followed, Leela began to regain her confidence fully. She returned to school, made new friends, and shared her story with trusted adults. The town rallied around her, offering support and encouragement. She had survived a frightening experience, but she had also learned the power of trust, kindness, and courage. Ethan's actions had given her more than safety. They had given her hope, confidence, and a sense of belonging. Ethan continued his life on the ranch, tending to the land, feeding the cattle, and following his daily routines. Yet the events in the woods remained in his mind, as a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of compassion. He understood that courage was not about seeking reward. It was about acting when it mattered most, in moments when fear threatened to paralyze and hope seemed distant. And so the town remembered the day the woods had echoed with shouts of fear, and how a quiet, humble rancher had transformed fear into safety, panic into trust, and uncertainty into hope. Ethan's actions became part of the town's history, a story of bravery, humility, and the enduring power of human kindness. Leela would never forget the rancher who had stepped in when she was terrified. The teenagers would never forget the lesson of responsibility and empathy. And the town, as a whole, would carry the story as a reminder that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when guided by courage, compassion, and the willingness to act. Ethan returned home that night, sitting quietly on his porch under the starry sky. The ranch was peaceful, the town safe, and the world a little brighter because of one act of bravery. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the morning that began like any other had become a story that would inspire people for years to come. And in that quiet satisfaction, Ethan understood something profound. True courage was simple, humble, and yet capable of changing lives forever.